Yeah, thank you. So I guess I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen. I promise I'm not going to drone on for an hour because nobody wants that at 8 o'clock. Are people, I guess, either by like the little reaction or just like a thumbs up, are people familiar like with what incubators are in general? There you go. I got one. Too. So incubators and accelerators take a lot of different forms. But in general, they're organizations that are built specifically to support generally early stage startups. And they're popping up. They're all over the country, all over the world, and each kind of has their own unique flavor. The organization I work for is Halcyon. We're based in Washington, D.C., and we support both very early stage social entrepreneurs and civically engaged artists. So I run the Social Enterprise Incubator, which awards 5-month residential fellowships to 8 social entrepreneurs. So we run relatively on the same schedule as a university. So we take entrepreneurs from all over the world. One way that we're unique is that we specifically focus on social entrepreneurs. So their businesses have to have a social impact mission baked into the DNA of the company. And that mission has to go on beyond just like creating jobs, because small businesses and startups generally are the ones creating jobs in the US economy. We're unique because we're a little longer. 5 months is a little longer than most incubator and accelerator programs for residential. So I work out of a 30,000 square foot mansion in Georgetown, and they live at our headquarter office. They get a $10,000 stipend for the duration of those 5 months to cover living expenses. And in addition to that kind of very tangible support, they get 5 months of pro bono Deloitte consulting, a year of pro bono legal services, free workspace, obviously while they're living in the house, and really they work out of our offices until their teams outgrow the workspace that we reserve for alumni, which is usually like anywhere from like 1 to 5 years out. And they also get pro bono leadership coaching, a mentor, and access to our network of advisors and investors. In addition to running that kind of like 5-month residential program, we also launched a program specifically for DC-based entrepreneurs earlier this year, which is a 12-month program. They meet at our offices for one Friday per month, and they have like a 1-week residency in January to kick off the programming, and a 1-week residency halfway through, which is supposed to be in August, but will likely not actually be residential. And we launched that program recognizing that there's a persistent and large amount of disparity in DC, and we wanted to support impact-driven companies in our own backyard. And it's personally a program I'm really proud of. Out of the 10 entrepreneurs in that specific program, 9 of them are entrepreneurs of color, and 9 of them are women. So we're really very earnestly supporting businesses that otherwise don't have access to the kinds of both like material and social capital that can really make the difference for really early stage startups. Any questions about kind of like the general model of incubators, accelerators? So as promised, and just a little bit more about Halcyon. So we've had about 100 companies come through our doors. We were co-founded by 2 women, one of whom is Dr. Sachiko Kuno. They're both like total badasses, but she was actually the first woman to get a PhD in biochemistry from Kyoto University. And after completing that degree, she took 2 drugs from idea stage to like public offering. And obviously, being a woman in both like business and being a woman in the science field, when she was coming up was really difficult. So when bought her second Georgetown mansion, of course, the idea was to open it up to entrepreneurs for her to nurture kind of the next generation of innovators. The businesses that have come through our doors have impacted over almost 2 million lives worldwide, created just under 1,500 jobs, raised over $120 million in capital funding. And again, as Jason said earlier, you know, we truly believe that good ideas come from everywhere. And part of the reason we provide housing and a stipend for living expenses is because we recognize that there are very real barriers to a lot of people being able to start companies, particularly for historically underrepresented and marginalized groups like women and people of color. And to date, 84% of the ventures that have been through our doors are still active. To put that in a bigger context, 90% of startups fail. So we feel like we've found the secret sauce. And I'll talk a little bit about women in entrepreneurship. So the photo you see of the 2 rows of folks, those are our opportunity intensive fellows. They're kind of like low-key my favorite, but don't tell anybody else. And then on the left is women from our 9th cohorts. We're on our 12th cohort of social entrepreneurs. And another thing so one of the hats I wear at Halcyon, in addition to like wrangling the cats that are our fellows and kind of keeping the programming running on a day-to-day basis, is I also help, I analyze data and write it into the social enterprise ecosystem report. So a few years ago, you know, staff were trying to figure out what data was out there about how social entrepreneurs are finding support, and they couldn't find it. So they started collecting that data, and they ranked the 21 largest cities in the United States based on how supportive they are of social entrepreneurs. So this is, and we do that from using a mix of like public data that we collect, and also by surveying social entrepreneurs and other people kind of working in that larger ecosystem. And that survey was over 600 respondents, and that's where this data comes from. So there's certainly progress being made. I think actually the diversity and inclusion piece is being made much better, specifically for social enterprises, businesses that are mission driven, opposed to all startups. For example, more venture capital went to the founder of WeWork than went to all women-founded companies last year. So women-founded companies received 2.2% of venture capital, and there were a couple of companies within that 2.2% that raised like a lot of venture capital that actually kind of inflated that number. So when you kind of look at what that spread looks like, it's even smaller. So women are making progress, but on average, we saw that men raised $1.9 million in 1 year, whereas women raised $1.2 million for their companies. That's the bad news. On the other hand, we're seeing that women are better leaders, I would say, because they hire more diverse teams. So we actually found that organizations led by women were more likely to have a staff that's a majority of people of color, which isn't surprising, also considering that actually Black women are the fastest group, the people who are founding small businesses and startups at the fastest rate, despite the like kind of like white dude in a hoodie stereotype we all think of when we think of startups. We also found that women were also more likely to hire other women. So 81% of the women we surveyed, or 81% of the businesses we surveyed that were led by women had majority women staff, so over 50%, whereas 62% of the organizations led by men had majority women staff. So I just also wanted to highlight a couple of our companies that are women-led that have just like had really amazing responses to the COVID-19 crisis. So the first one is Omnibus. They're a medical tech company. She's brilliant. Catherine Clayton, the founder, she's not that much older than I am. Something you get used to when you work at an organization like Halcyon is you're never the smartest person in the room. But she's an engineer by training. They developed a device that slides onto an iPhone. And then they developed a specific special test strip, and it's basically a mobile lab. So they started by detecting cholera in water, and the kind of like standard status quo is that cholera takes a week to test and detect in water, and they can't, and it has to be like sent to a proper lab. With the device that they developed, they can test cholera for water for cholera in the field. Anybody can do it with a minimal amount of training, and they can detect it and then map it in under 30 minutes, which is a huge game changer in terms of tracking outbreaks, of getting supplies where they need to when there is an outbreak. But they're a team of engineers. They're problem solvers. So when it came out that personal protective equipment and masks were in shortage, they designed this 3D printed mask that's specifically designed to fit a variety of faces, and they made clearly I'm not a tech person, the instructions, the pattern, open source so that anybody with a 3D printer can print these, and it can just be changed out with the medical grade filter. And they've been printing these and distributing them. They're based in San Francisco, so they're at kind of one of the epicenters of COVID-19. And then Tables Without Borders they're currently in residency at Halcyon. They're a company that takes refugees and asylum seekers who are based in the DC area, and who have a culinary background. They place them in training and pay them a living wage in restaurants around the city. And then at the end of that training program, they host a dinner at the restaurant that displays the food from their culture. And then they work with them for job placement. So they were actually supposed to have their kind of like next class of trainees start this month. They had contracts with restaurants and everything. And most restaurants, and all the restaurants in DC, or many restaurants in DC, are closed. And of course, many of the people who work kind of less than living wage jobs in restaurants are refugees and immigrants and folks who are undocumented. So people who are being hit particularly hard by this crisis. So they've set up shop in one of the closed restaurants, using one of the chefs that they had already signed on for their training period. And they did a GoFundMe, and they have raised almost $15,000. I just checked earlier today. For their immigrant chef to prepare free meals to distribute to vulnerable refugee and immigrant families in the DMV area. And that was obviously something they weren't planning, and it's just been really inspiring for me. And clearly this is not representative of all the businesses that have been through Halcyon. Some certainly are hurting quite badly at the moment, but it's been inspiring for me just to see kind of the resiliency and the creativity and the willingness to pitch in from the companies that have been through our doors to do what they can in light of just a truly horrific and unprecedented time. So I'm going to stop talking and I'll open it up to the floor. And I'll put links particularly to the Kickstarter for Tables Without Borders in the chat.
How are you guys funded? I know you guys do a lot of work helping other people get funds, and so how do you guys kind of make sure that you guys are well funded and support other people getting? I mean, are you competing with yourselves, or how are you able to do that?
Yeah, so most of the businesses that have gone through Halcyon are for profit. There are some nonprofits sprinkled through there, but actually starting, we just closed our application for the next cohort at the beginning of April. Excuse me, and starting with the next cohort, we've decided to only take for-profit businesses for a variety of reasons I'm happy to get into if people are interested. But Halcyon ourselves are a 501c3 nonprofit. So in order to maintain that status, we have to have a certain amount of small sum donations from individuals. Obviously, we raise money from our board and other kind of high net worth individuals. Another one of the hats I wear is grant writing. We got our first federal grant in almost a year ago, which was really exciting. The funding landscape in DC is not what it is in Silicon Valley in New York, and we actually see startups moving out of DC to be closer to and access that funding. So we started an angel funding network with that federal grant money to be able to better provide very early stage funding to companies. So angel investors generally invest in companies that have not opened an official round yet. So very, very early stage. They're usually raising less than $1 million, which is a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of startups is not a lot of money. And that very early stage funding can be really critical for product development or developing software, that kind of stuff. Again, with an eye towards prioritizing traditionally underrepresented founders. And we also get a lot of corporate sponsorships, both in kind. Oh, something I forgot to mention is all the startups that come through our doors get $15,000 in Amazon Web Services credits. And both Amazon Web Services and Capital One are sponsoring the Opportunity Intensive, which is that specific program specifically for DC-based startups that I mentioned earlier. So that was a long answer to a short question, which is we get a variety of funding. Anybody have questions? What are what are some areas or sectors that you're interested in?
Hi, Maggie. JJ, class of 1990. Thank you very much for filling out my time, I guess, here. I'm between my work and homeschooling. I've been pretty busy, so I was looking forward to this today. And, it's wonderful to hear some of your experiences. As a matter of fact, maybe a little over 20 years ago, I was working in a new project here in Panama, in Central America, where we were reconverting a former military base, Fort Clayton, into the City of Knowledge. And within that, there was a technology park, sort of creating a Silicon Valley type of environment. And within that, we started the first business incubator in Panama. And it went
so cool.
Of evolutions. First it was giving them a cheap place to rent some office and some infrastructure. Try to help them get some grant money, and then go throughout the process and some private and public funding for it. So it's very interesting what you're doing, and I even enjoy even more so that you guys are focused within a niche market. So that is quite interesting.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been a wild ride. I've been at Halcyon for a little over a year now, and I'm sure my classmates here will attest that it's not necessarily something I ever saw myself doing, but it's been a really welcome kind of career change. So
interesting.
Maggie, could you tell us a few of the other types of businesses that you are helping to start? Maybe some of the more recent ones that have either gone on or not gone on?
Yeah, sure. So as you can imagine, many, but not all of the companies come through Halcyon have some sort of tech component. So I said we have 8 businesses currently in residence. One of my favorites is a company called Flick Shop. Mainly because I love the team. The founder is just like this huge teddy bear. You like can't help but smile when he walks in the room. He's just a really good guy. But and I can link to them in the chat. They are a company that keeps incarcerated loved ones connected to their family members. So it's an app, and for 99 cents, you can, you just download the app. You can upload a picture and some quick text and send a postcard to an incarcerated loved one for 99 cents. And, you know, now that everybody is living in quarantine and people aren't able to travel to see family, or particularly, you know, family who have grandparents, parents in nursing homes and kind of assisted living situations, they've seen a massive uptick in sales. And, you know, particularly right now is, for rightly so, prison visiting rooms are closed. You know, they've seen a massive uptick in sales. And another portion, they have that's their kind of their main product. But they also run a business school for people who are re-entering from prison. And they also have Bookshop Angels, so people can go on and donate Bookshop credits so that children of incarcerated parents can send their parents postcards for free. And that idea was born out of the fact that the founder, Marcus Bullock, he has a wonderful TED Talk that I highly recommend taking a look at, since we all are spending our lives on screens now. He was arrested and sentenced to adult maximum security prisons at the age of 15, and he spent 8 years incarcerated. And he frequently says that his mom's letters and photos she committed to writing him every single day while he was inside saved his life. And his mom is also now one of the main people on his team too. So it's just like feel good all the way around. There was also a really lovely Washington Post article about their company around Valentine's Day, because it's actually usually their busiest time of the year. It's Valentine's Day. So I can link to those in the chat, but
please do. That is very interesting.
Yeah, they're just a really wonderful company. Another company we have with us right now, Tables Without Borders, I mentioned earlier, is our current fellows. They're actually co-founded, so it's a woman and a man. And here we go, I'll link to this Washington Post article. Another very relevant company that we have right now with us is actually a nonprofit called Issue Voter. And they are a web-based platform that provides nonpartisan, fact-based analyses of every bill going through Congress, and gives you you can directly communicate to your representative through the web app. So clearly very important going into a presidential election, but also important now. Every time I see her, she's like, oh, there are X number, there are like 50 different coronavirus bills in Congress right now. So just tracking kind of what our legislators are doing. And they give a really brief synopsis and then kind of pull quotes from people on both sides of the aisle, so you can make an informed but unbiased assessment of things that are going up. And it also kind of matches you to different people, like different representatives or presidential or candidates, and gives you a scorecard of how your representative is doing in Congress. So that when you do go to vote, you can say, oh, they really are aligned with my issues, and I want to vote for them again. Or, oh, I was really depending on them to pass affordable housing and they didn't. You know, who else can I vote for? So they're really exciting. We have a Nigerian-based company that's addressing youth unemployment. So a lot of Nigerian youth are graduating from university and unable to get jobs. And he has this really interesting model where he was doing in person, now it's completely virtual, skills training on highly marketable digital skills, and then places them with countries from around the world. And the phrase he always uses is that, like, you know, young people in Nigeria want to work for Facebook from Nigeria, and he's helping to make that happen. And there's also just kind of like there's a huge lack of tech talent, not only in Nigeria, but across African nations. And they're just doing really, really well, and continuing to scale across Nigeria and looking to scale to other countries. And another company for which this particular time has been, they've been able to be incredibly valuable is a company called Rose. They are a mental health platform that helps providers better monitor will match patients to providers and then help providers better monitor their client symptoms, including early detection of trauma, anxiety, and depression. And their business has just exploded because everybody is doing telehealth, and everybody is anxious. So it's been really wonderful to see how, as I said before, how the companies that have been through Halcyon or are currently with Halcyon have been able to do their part in this crisis.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Maggie, in addition to a lot of Zoom, I've also found myself watching a lot of television. And I saw on HBO, I saw the story with Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos, and I was, is that story make things step backwards for women entrepreneurs, or have you felt anything that way? And I think that was, as she kind of came up, it was, she was this kind of young hotshot, and then it fell apart, obviously. And so, I think I don't know if you guys have to think about that or anything like that.
Yeah, we certainly do. I have so many thoughts and feelings about Elizabeth Holmes. It certainly didn't help women in science and women in entrepreneurship. So Catherine, who I mentioned, who's the founder of Omnibus, that's making 3D printing masks. So our program is capstoned by 2 big pitch events of about 100, with an audience of about 100, 150 people. And she was, pitching to these huge audiences, getting ready to raise money, right as those documentaries and stuff came out, and that was really unveiled that Elizabeth Holmes basically stole from people. And yeah, every time she was pitching, she would get the question about Elizabeth Holmes raised all this money and her technology didn't work. Does your technology actually work? And she's like, yes, I've published 9 peer-reviewed studies on it. It definitely works. But I think it's a great lesson about Silicon Valley in particular, that if you have the right connections, if you have the right skin color, if you're willing to weirdly adapt your voice to be lower than it naturally is, if you have the right charm, you can really go far with not a lot of substance. And we take extremely early stage ventures. We had a group of co-founders come in a couple of years ago, who, again, a company that I just really love, and I have a really big soft spot for the founders, called Believe, and they make a smart pill bottle that monitors opioid patients in particular for now, and they want to scale to patients in general. That pairs to the phone app, so that you have to scan with your phone. You have to scan the pill bottle in order to receive a pill. You have to fill out your pain scale. It helps doctors monitor and detect early on the abuse and misuse of opioids. And they came in with they were college kids who came in with a prototype literally made of duct tape, and didn't know really anything. I mean, they were 22. You don't even have a fully formed frontal lobe at 22. And certainly something we work very closely with them on is to make sure that they have the substance to back up what they're doing. And we will take companies as early as idea stage. And we've certainly taken companies where they don't know if their idea is going to work. And I think we work very hard to create an environment where failure is okay. It's a matter of learning from it and getting, picking yourself back up. But yeah, certainly we are adamant about kind of transparency and substance.
So Maggie, you, granted, I don't necessarily live in DC, but my understanding is the DC community is going to be changing very rapidly with the new Amazon headquarters. How do you see that impacting the types of startups you have coming towards you guys have, and then also the types of enterprises that you guys are going to want to support going forward?
Yeah, I think, so, I mean, Amazon works with a ton of businesses like ours, or not business, a ton of organizations like ours, you know, and they don't give away, what, $400,000 worth of Amazon Web Services credits to like us and 50 other people, like out of the goodness of their heart. You know, they do that because it looks good for their company. They do that because like once you're on the AWS platform, you need to stay on it. So like they're just like getting people really on and like creating customers, which is fine. Like, cool. You want to give us credits, like we'll take them. But I certainly, they also treat, and this is true with Deloitte, this is true with a lot of large corporations that have close relationships to organizations like ours that sponsor us in one way or many ways. They're really using us as innovation labs, right? It's the, you know, it's all of the, sorry, my cat's messing with my screen. It's all of the young, interesting innovation and none of the cost or risk to them. So there are certainly companies, one of the DC-based companies we work with, who again, actually I want to highlight because I deeply respect the decision they made in light of COVID-19. It's called Please Assist Me. They sell to apartment complexes. And it's basically like every personal service app wrapped into one thing. So Please Assist Me is their personal assistant. You're kind of the personal assistant for the normal man or woman. So they'll like get your dry cleaning and do your laundry and pick up your groceries, and everything is done when you get home from work. They're a married couple, co-founders, which is like a 10 out of 10 on adorable scale. And they're like my age, they're like 28, you know, young Black founders. The CEO like did all the original coding for the app. They're just superstars. But you know, their assistants, their frontline workers who are going in and out of people's apartments and going to grocery stores and going all over the place, are almost exclusively Black women, and they pay a living wage. But you know, they had to make the decision of whether or not they were going to continue to put their employees at risk of contracting COVID-19 in the name of their bottom line. And they chose to furlough their workers so they could collect unemployment. And now the two of them are splitting their fulfillment duties because, you know, as Black founders, as we've seen this disease disproportionately affect Black communities, that was not a risk they were willing to put their employees at, which is, as you were talking about earlier, Jason, I think such an incredible display of leadership. It makes me really proud to be someone who supports them, a very tiny portion of their journey. But that's all to say is Amazon attempted to do something similar, this kind of like personal assistant model where it's like all in one, and they failed miserably. So they're like keenly aware that like they're on the Amazon Web Services platform and like they have these connections with Amazon now through us, that you know, that's their exit strategy is Amazon will at some point probably try and buy them. So certainly, and I frankly, like, I don't know how HQ2 is going to influence the kind of businesses that are started here. I think it's certainly going to exacerbate like existing disparities we already see in the city across, you know, small business owners and who has access to funding and who has access to kind of that social capital. and they're going to import 5,000 tech bros as their talent. Like they're not going to hire local DC talent, which is frustrating, but also like hopefully some of our companies might be able to poach them. Because a lack of tech talent is certainly an issue here in DC. And again, part of why we have a little bit of a challenge holding on to these really awesome startups, tech-based startups. And that was a good question. Yeah, not super excited about HQ2 being in our backyard, but what are you gonna do? Are there any kinds of companies that people are interested in, or certain sectors?
Matt?
Yeah.
Wait.
sorry,
Well,
No, go ahead, Natalie.
Go ahead, whoever started first.
No, go ahead, Natalie. You first, please.
Thank you. I've taken a lot of time. Pittsburgh, and everybody comes down with all of everything I do. I just keep trying to do like everything. Like it's just, I still stand out there in the cul-de-sacs and make sure that everybody's doing all of their exercises and all of those things. But Pittsburgh is my company, and it's one of those problems, because how are you going to come and see? Now I'm still taking control of that as the person who's in control, but at the same time, what can I do different in order to make people feel more, do you know what I'm saying?
Feel my hair.
No, and here comes my son.
Feel my hair.
No, yes, see, these are the distractions that I have. Do you know, like, here he is. He wants me to see his hair.
Feel my hair.
All right, get out of here. I'm trying to have an actual conversation. Get out of here. But this is my life.
Yeah, I think a lot of people.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are feeling that now, and certainly as I've been on calls with our entrepreneurs, kids and dogs are coming in. I was on a call with an entrepreneur the other day, and his 2 young daughters came in like deeply concerned that they couldn't find their like favorite big stick because they needed to play Elsa. And he's like, guys, I'm like, on the call. So I think everybody is just kind of doing the best they can. And I think something that we've been trying really hard to do with our entrepreneurs is just be vulnerable and let them know that it's okay to have your off days. This is crisis management. And I think one of the most valuable kind of intangible aspects of what we do is that community, and letting them know that they have us and each other to fall back on.
Yeah, no, I feel really great. I feel guilty about all the other Mercersburg people. They've got some stuff going on, especially like losing somebody recently like we did. That's insane. And then to see like all of the other good things that happen, it's a very amazing thing that we are able to do. But at the same time, when we lose people, it's not very good, and I don't feel good about it. I don't feel good about losing Matt Danziger. I don't feel good about anything, but it's just one of those amazing things, and that's one of the cool things about becoming a friend of Mercersburg, because Mercersburg lets it go. Mercersburg says this stuff is happening and it's not okay. And It just makes me feel really bad. I'm sorry. I
Oh,
don't
no,
like
that's
it.
okay. Yeah.
But we're going to be okay.
Yeah,
And
I think
that's
so.
the most important thing. I think that's the most important thing for everyone from Mercersburg to remember. We're going to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amen to that, Natalie.
Sorry.
What?
Amen to that.
Yeah.
I know. We're all going to be okay.
Yeah.
We're all going to be
Sorry
okay.
to interrupt, but somebody asked me the other day, how do you feel? I'm like, I feel like a millionaire. I have my health alive. I have everything that I need right now. So,
Yeah,
everything else
we're
will
going to be okay.
show itself afterwards.
Yeah. Jen,
We're
you were
gonna
going to
be
jump
okay.
in.
Yeah,
We're all going to be okay.
amen to that. I'll echo the other sentiments. We are going to be okay. I'm curious to know, Maggie, from your perspective with what you've seen in the last month, have you seen any of the organizations pivot in terms of product offerings? Like, I'm really interested to see what will come out of this with like telehealth and, all these different technologies and apps that will probably are in the process of being born as we speak. So I'm curious to know if you've heard anything or like there are any sectors that the organizations focus on right now.
Yeah. And it's interesting, we were just having a conversation about this the other day. We're in the process of selecting our next cohort. And the question, excuse me, for us came up, like, should we be really prioritizing applications, applicants, and companies that, are going to be responding to COVID-19 over the next 6 months, a year, 18 months. And we haven't quite figured that out yet, but I've certainly seen a number of companies, both in our portfolio and companies, oftentimes people apply 2 or 3 times before they actually become a fellow. So we receive usually about between 400 and 500 applications for 8 spots. So our CEO likes to say that we're more selective than Stanford. So that means it's competitive, and so people often apply more than once. So an example of the first example that's coming to mind that's not specifically telehealth, well, 2 examples actually. One is a fellow who came through a year and a half ago. Again, like low-key one of my favorites. She's a pediatrician by training, and she originally had an app. She had an 18-year-old patient die of obesity-related complications. She grew up in an under-resourced rural area of Louisiana and saw health disparities her entire life. She's a Black woman and is really passionate about kind of health disparities and social determinants of health, and was planning to launch an app that assisted pediatricians and teenagers to better manage obesity management plans. And she has since pivoted, and last week, I had to look at the date because time doesn't exist anymore. Last week actually launched a telehealth platform, because a significant portion of her pediatrician practice was doing house calls. And that's, not safe for her. It's not safe for her family. She has a young child at home, and certainly not safe for her patients. So she launched that platform last week. Another business, also women founded and also women focused, called Uplift. So she was doing coaching for working moms, particularly moms in kind of corporate settings. And she completely pivoted. She's a former Google employee, left to start this venture, and pivoted actually amazing. She's one of the most efficient people I've ever met, amazingly quickly. I think maybe just a couple of weeks into when COVID-19 became really serious. And I don't know what crystal ball she was using that everybody would be working remotely within a matter of a couple of weeks, but she hit it really fast and she pivoted her platform to be for anybody working remotely. And she's I've been working remotely from home for years, and I already support parents in the workforce, women in the workforce who have children. So she pivoted to like helping people be successful remote workers, which like kudos to everybody who has a child at home, because I literally don't know how you're getting anything done. And she's really like been really successful in that pivot. There was one more that like really briefly came to mind, but I think ventures like that, there's a venture that is currently being considered, that's in the application process, that we saw last year, and they're a chatbot for girls in Pakistan to like get their questions about women's health answered, because it's highly stigmatized. And they launched an additional bot specific to COVID-19, so that really anybody in Pakistan, but kids in particular, can message this chatbot and get their questions answered about COVID-19. And I've seen a couple of other kind of like telehealth oriented applications come through. And some, you know, some are better than others. Like I had this like video platform application, and it's like, oh, but we're so different from Zoom and everybody else. We use blockchain, and like, I don't know, something about affordability. It was an African company, and I was like, yeah, no, not really impact driven. The model didn't seem very different either. But yeah, I think you're completely right. I mean, small businesses are what keep our economy afloat. And I've been so deeply disappointed that the you know, payroll protection plan federal money has run out, and most of it went to insanely large corporations. I don't know any of, almost all of our startups applied, and maybe one has gotten some of that money, and it was less than they asked for. And so, you know, they drive our economy, they drive innovation, and you know, if you can order from a small business tonight, do it. Support small businesses as much as you can, because they're being so disproportionately impacted right now. And they will be the heart of our economic recovery whenever that happens. So yeah, I think you're right on, Jen, that like startups will be, you know, the ones that drive our economy forward, and also the ones that you know, make the most of the situation and help us, I hope, to transform kind of our country and our society for the better.
Maggie, I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
So I was wondering if you guys, obviously I love all these ideas, particularly the testing for the water samples. I wish we had that in our hospital, you know, a month ago, because testing is a real issue right now, and the time frame for waiting for samples to come back is just, a lot can happen in that time, especially with COVID-19 and everything that's going on now. But a lot of amazing ideas coming out of this incubator. But I was wondering if you ever come across issues, you know, once a company kind of gets its footing and it starts hiring more people, and it becomes more of an entity in and of itself, do they ever have issues in terms of organization and, you know, getting their product together? If it's more complicated, a more complicated product that requires more individuals, particularly in tech, do you kind of provide them with a resource or a connection with individuals that have already been in that sector and had that experience? Or how do you proceed if they're struggling potentially?
Yeah, that's a great question. And certainly we've seen fellows struggle. There's a fellow, oh man, he probably came through our program, I'd say at least 3-4 years ago, maybe more. He's one of those people where when he applied with this idea, and he was like, I don't really know if this is even going to work, but like he was a PhD student at Georgetown. The company is called Odorless Sound, and it's like a wearable device that vibrates. And and I'm clearly neither a tech person nor do I have a medical background, but it does something that it like vibrates so that you don't experience motion sickness, which has like a really wide applicability. He's actually been approached by the military for pilots. But he, yeah, I think maybe it took him years to get even just like a prototype put together. And, you know, we do as best we can. I think for starters, in terms of like intellectual property, they get a year's worth of pro bono legal services, which can be worth like thousands upon thousands of dollars. And they get a mentor. I mean, technically that mentor relationship is for the 5 months that they're in the program. And that mentor is generally from their sector, and depending on what the company is, might have done something extremely similar. But oftentimes that relationship far outlasts that 5 month agreement. And certainly, you know, we provide them with as much support as we can. We have a really wide network. And so they rely on us as an organization, but they also are so incredible at coming together for each other. Like even if they weren't at Halcyon at the same time, there's this huge like WhatsApp chat where like everybody who's ever been in the program is all on it. And like they'll say like, oh, hey, does anybody have, I'm looking for like X type of expert. Does anybody have connections? And most startups, I have like conflicting feelings about it, but a lot of startups will go through multiple programs like ours. And like Pleve, who I mentioned earlier, who has a smart pill bottle, they came to us when they were super early stage and like barely had a prototype, and then they went to another incubator that's specifically for like med tech companies. So that's all to say is that they grow these really massive networks too, just by virtue of their experience and all the other programs that they participate in. And they're really wonderful about making those introductions and warm connections for each other too. But certainly like we always say that like once you're a fellow for life. And I mean, we have people who still work out of our offices who are long graduated finished the kind of official portion of their program. Who, again, like when I'm actually physically going into the office, I see like every single morning when I walk in. So yeah, certainly if they want that support, it's always there for them. And we're always happy to remove as many barriers as we possibly can.
Yeah, I think that's really awesome. Building that community, I think it can make all the difference in the success of a company or not. And I didn't know if Halcyon would ever try to, you know, kickstart different companies, not just in the DC area, like either through just as a available resource. Obviously, you're not going to give them everything if they're not physically there, but just kind of building that community even further.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And we started doing that, and we're in like earlier stages of doing that on a larger scale. So again, typically over the summer, so again, like we have 2 5-month residencies, which means we have the summer months open. We've been running these like 2-week intensive programs, and we call them intensives because it's the bulk of our 5-month program squished into 2 weeks. And we invite groups of international entrepreneurs to participate in those. And those groups are usually kind of co-sponsored between their local government entities and corporate sponsors and some other kind of fundraising. But a couple of years ago, we had a group of all women entrepreneurs from Saudi Arabia. This summer, we were supposed to have a group from Togo and another from Bahrain, but those are clearly not going to happen in person. And we're figuring out a way that we can at least deploy part of that programming virtually. And another thing we do is we license our specific methodology to other organizations. So and we've done that. We've licensed our methodology to Kyoto University. They started their own incubator. And it's very much a turnkey kind of product, but it certainly is not like an incubator in a box, right? But it does accelerate that process, a solid 24 to 36 months. And we've learned some lessons over in the 5 years that we've been up and running. So we look forward to continuing to help build other organizations like ours that carry our same values, have our same DNA, but also can adapt to the local context. And someday I think we like to open halcyons in other places in the world, but that's a little far off.
Maggie, thank you so much. This was great. And one lesson learned is that I should take the picture as early as possible. I've been getting emails from people saying that they're sorry that they had to leave, that they were really enjoying it. But Tally and Maureen, if you guys can show your video on, I'd love to be able to grab a photo real quick. I know maybe you can't. But and just look and smile at your camera in here so we can post this. And awesome. And kind of share this. We're going to be running these series kind of throughout this period. So I encourage you guys to keep coming onto the events website and see what programming there is. Next week in particular, there's going to be a virtual book club meeting, and then kind of a tour of a story of the stained glass windows, and kind of looking at which would be really interesting for our school minister to kind of run people through. But as we were saying earlier, your lessons learned from this process. One thing that we've learned is that we can have engaging sessions, and super thankful for alumni like yourself that are able to share their story this way. And thank you guys for spending the time. I do want to, of course, thank Denise Bennett, who's really was the one who kind of set everything up in here and is here as well. And I want to point out Todd McGuire, who's on the faculty at Mercersburg and teaches the Springboard, so kind of our capstone course on entrepreneurship. And so great that he was able to kind of come in and hear some of the stuff that Maggie's doing. Certainly, we're not at that level, but he tries to run that like an incubator where they kind of run their own company and kind of go through that process. And Maggie's been generous to say, she can be a resource for our students, which is always great when we can have alumni kind of connect with our students that way. So thank you, Todd, especially for being able to take time out of the kind of virtual classroom. I know you're working hard there and joining this session. Kind of as a follow-up for this, I'll certainly include Maggie's email and any links that she might have, so you guys can certainly, she's happy to, have any further conversations. But I do want to be mindful of everyone's time. But Maggie, thank you so much. This was great. And thank you guys, and stay in touch, and I hope to see you at another event soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's nice to see some friendly faces. Hi, Mr. Bennett.
Somebody here wants to say hello.
Nice to see you.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you. Thanks, Maggie.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Good
Maggie.
to see you. Take care, everybody.
Great job,
Sure.
Maggie. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. Take care.